Muy bien, pues buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and greetings also to all of those who are following us online through YouTube. We're going to reach the 8th panel of this doctoral seminar program, Charles V European Award, European Disability Forum, United in Diversity: The Impact of the European Union on the Lives of Persons with Disabilities. It's going to be chaired by Rosa Martínez de Codes. We already introduced her yesterday, but for those of you who haven't been watched the previous educations, I may say that Rosa María Rosa María is an American history professor from the Complutense University of Madrid and vice president of the International Religious Liberty Association. She's a member of the jury of the European Disability Forum grants. Rosa María has the floor and she's going to introduce the next speaker. Good afternoon, all of you who are following us from the other side of the world. I'm sure there will be someone there. I would like to start saying that this last part of the day is going to be brief because we just have one panelist. Let us talk about the profile of the next panelist because that will give us a very clear direction on the project that he wants to present. His project has to do with European action, the role of European cooperation in Costa Rica, the inclusion of people with disability as a pillar for social development. Who is Sergio? Sergio is a predoctoral research in constitutional law from the University of Castilla-La Mancha, co-director of the Center of Advanced Studies in Disability, and he has been directed by Enrique Vela, a chair in law that we know very well. His analysis on the structural obstacles faced by people with disabilities in the access of justice and the consolidation of what he refers to as right of he talks about these rights of people with disability as an independent discipline in law. He has a very solid academic curriculum with 9.2. He has a university master's in constitutional law, and he has different specialist titles that he has taken. He has studied fundamental rights, gender, discriminatory law. He has received numerous awards, like the award of the Social Council of the University of Castilla-La Mancha. He has received the extraordinary master's degree, and he was a finalist in the ELSA Codemaster competition. He will explain it later on. He has produced many papers and very early, because he has been able to publish in Timor of Lang, Dickinson College Atelier. Those are specialized publications, and in other publications of constitutional law, which makes it clear that he has been able to publish at a very young age in specialized magazines. I am also shocked by the fact that he has had an international stay, and this is one of the keys in his project in the University of Costa Rica, where he was teaching and lecturing on the access of justice and visibility. So this is the core of his research work: access to justice and disability in Costa Rica. I don't know why he went to Costa Rica, because I haven't accessed this information, but I'm sure he will share this with us. He is coordinating an association called Legal Clinic in the chair of disability and dependence of the University of Castilla-La Mancha. Legal clinic AD. Then he also works for La Valía, and he participates in competitive projects funded by the Innovation and European funds. Innovation institution and European funds. He has focused as a researcher on disability law in the European framework. He is interested in Europe. Then, of course, there may be challenges when it comes to observe or implement how the European regulation is valid in contexts such as the one in Costa Rica or in Latin America as at large, because one of the main characteristics is the structural poverty of its population, not disability but structural poverty. So it is a challenge to think that European regulation on disability, our programs, reforms, laws, can make it so far in external action. But he suggests two objectives that I find very clear. One, assess the efficiency of development policies of the European Union in the field of disability, and on the other hand, to analyze how these influence public policies in Costa Rica. He doesn't talk about case studies, he talks about Costa Rica. So, this is your afternoon. You are the star. Take the floor.
Muy buenas tardes. En primer lugar,
Good afternoon. I would like to start, as it is necessary, by thanking Professor. Thanks for your kindness in your words. And I also want to thank the colleagues who are interpreting. Thanks to everyone who has been in charge of the logistics of this seminar. So, if you allow me, if the directors of the seminar and the secretary allow me, I will take the floor and I will address a topic that may be very specific in the field of disability. As Professor Rosa was saying, I address disability law as an autonomous discipline in the legal science, but how does my thesis connect with the role of European cooperation in Costa Rica, the inclusion of people with disability as access of social development? Why do I address this? For what purpose do I address this? And what sustains it? What grounds it? What are the foundations? In these 43 minutes and 20 seconds, that's what I will do. Try to give a response, a brief, specific response to try to address one of the most relevant aspects that we may find in humanitarian aid in favor of vulnerable collectives and minority groups. To echo what the professor said and trying to answer that question, why Costa Rica? In 2023, when I started my doctorate studies, my dear professor, Mr. Verla, suggested that I coordinated the legal clinic, one of the three pillars of his chair that he co-chairs together with Professor Juana Morcillo, a chair in administrative law, and I started coordinating this legal clinic, teaching a very innovative teaching methodology, and the goal of it is to help those who need it the most. third sector entities and the population that these entities work for. Not only people with disability, but also people in a situation of dependence, people in situations of poverty, gender violence victims, etc. I mentioned one of the pillars. The other pillar is the America unit that is led by Mr. Reborio, the constitutional law chair by university. In 2023, I had the opportunity to have a brief stay. Thanks to this brief stay, I was able to I had that was a milestone in my personal and professional life, this day in Costa Rica. So since 2023, I have been traveling. Been traveling nonstop. That's the only part of Latin America that I know, a country of 5 million inhabitants. Around 5 million and 1,000. This such a small country hosted me warmly, and it gave me the opportunity to elaborate on this topic, disability law. And I realized that what I'm doing makes sense and it can have a practical implementation. Disability law is an autonomous discipline in legal sciences like administrative or mercantile law does not disaggregate a law. On the other hand, it unifies all the gaps that exist, and that because nowadays people with disability don't enjoy fundamental rights, as we have been able to see throughout this seminar. So, thanks to these research stays in my university, I was lucky enough to become a main researcher, regardless of my youth. I was just 25, and I was able to lead very small and humble project, development work. It was 1,900 euro, and you wonder, can you do cooperation with this? Well, we did so. When you talk about development cooperation, it's not only about money, it's also about knowledge transfer, and that's what I wanted to do. My purpose was to transfer my knowledge and the theoretical knowledge that I have for the benefit of people who need it. In this case, for the benefit of people with disability in Costa Rica, and more specifically, indigenous population and African descendant population. Let's talk about facts. I was telling you that Costa Rica, rounding up, has 5 million inhabitants. There are 670,000 people with disability, according to the latest figures shared by the government of Costa Rica. That is around 17.2% of grown-up population, 17.2% of the adult population. Spain has many more inhabitants, 50 million, and I think we have 400,000 people with disability. On a comparative level, we see how the rate of people with disability in Costa Rica is much larger. If we keep fine-tuning and refining what we know, and we talk about what percentage of this population has a disability and is also part of an indigenous community, I must say that although Costa Rica is not like Guatemala, Costa Rica has 8 groups of indigenous people. I had the privilege of becoming familiar with 2 of these populations, Bribri in Talamanca and Marecares in Siquirres. This picture here, and I won't receive a cum laude to the best PowerPoint. There's always a reason. I have a legal background. I'm a jurist. And my teacher, in one of his lessons when I was in my master's degree, I learned that if jurists opt to be a lawyer, are not going to address the magistrates, saying in slide number 3 you can see, no, we are jurists and we must be professional speakers. We must be masters of oratory and talk without errors. If you make a mistake, not only you make a mistake for yourself, you have probably done harm to your client. So here we have an image from Siquirres. I went there this summer and I defended the project of legal clinics. The legal clinic of the municipality of Siquirres. The purpose was to let them know that if this municipality was able to implement this legal clinic, that would provide technical, legal, free assistance to the Quebecares population. I got to know them here. I was doing some teaching there, and that would raise awareness on rights, so that in the case of an over exertion of power by the public powers, there was a lesser danger of having the rights affected. From that 17.2% of the grown-up population that has disability, 4.3% is indigenous and 4.1% African descendant. So why did I choose Siquirres? It is one of the municipalities that I have traveled to the most since since 2023, because it's one of the municipalities with the largest rate of African descendant population.
Es comprender de que verdaderamente tener.
So I want to really see the right to disability embedded in the legal framework so that they can harmonize and standardize all the regulations in terms of disability to effectively defend their rights. In October the 10th, 2025, I published this monography. This is a collective work. This is the outcome of this development cooperation project that I led together with colleagues from Costa Rica. It is open source and it comes together with an audiobook for accessibility reasons, because I'm talking about accessibility in Costa Rica, but I need to guarantee it is accessible, and that's why we made it available as an audiobook. So in Costa Rica we have 24 territories and 8 indigenous languages. But since there are 2 indigenous languages have been lost in recent years, the Chorrotegas have lost the language, even if the government is obliged to safeguard their language. And there are 8 indigenous peoples. So they have every right to stay in their lands, and yet they have lost their language. The same happened to the Weteres in the 18th century. So if I get any deeper, I am still in the introduction because I want to show you I want to show you the summary. And now for 30 more minutes I will develop it. You can see here the 2 pillars: the European strategy on the peoples with disability 2021-2030 and the European Union action on social inclusion and the promotion of human rights in Costa Rica. So if I said this is the topic of my thesis, if I told you the purpose of my thesis, what does it have to do with these two things? Because in that way, when we do cooperation for development, according to the UN Convention, this is what will sustain the human rights model endorsed by the UN, the New York Convention. The medical rehabilitating model that was used in Spain was enforced in the constitutional framework until 2024. Well, with all this information that I've gathered, that I've drawn, that I've collected since I've graduated, well, I went to Costa Rica to do this knowledge transfer, and then I realized, well, someone from the Legislative Assembly said to me, Sergio, it's okay to talk about human rights, but more than defending human rights, you need to make sure that a person with disability has something to eat, at least every day. So as Professor Cotta said, you need to assess the efficacy of the tools, of the regulations. It is not just mere words. You need actions. You need to move from words to actions, always for the sake of people with disability. So the European strategy on people with disability forces us to start out with the concept or notion of rights and how it is embedded in the social construct. St. Augustine from Hippo, in one of his best works, City of God, said that if there is no justice, there is no rights. There are no rights. But what if, or laws, but what if the laws are the reason for justice to be missing? This is what happened in Spain up to 2024. The law itself was to blame for the absence of many rights of people with disability. For many reasons, as some of the speakers said yesterday, there was a law, there was a regulation, and a series of facts that enabled for the discrimination of people with disability just for the sake of their disability. They could incapacitate someone because of their disabilities, and so on and so forth. So a law was not the best way or the best guarantor of the rights of the people with disabilities. If you look at the convention and read the first article, what is disability? Disability is a deficiency. What? It's my only criticism to the convention, but we are talking about the social model of human rights, and you started by saying that people with disabilities have deficiencies. These are people in full. They're not, the poor people, and they have every right to get an equal treatment and equal rights. So this is a fundamental approach if we are to see the perspective of the European Union, because it uses human rights as a basis and goes beyond the status of the states. It looks at equality in foreign affairs and cooperation. It's not just giving money, but help other states transfer knowledge or even lend some tools. So that strategy has a core purpose, which is promoting and safeguarding that the content of the New York Convention 2006 is effectively applied, both within the European Union and within each member state. This strategy foresees that all people with disabilities enjoys the same rights with the same opportunities than people without disabilities. And then in 2021, the European Union started to update a set of tools with the aim of changing the approach to end all discriminations that are still in force. I was talking about Article 32 of the New York Convention. Stefan Strombel, a senior specialist of the ILO and also the UNCE, said that that was one of the most criticized articles when the convention was being drafted. So he said, why shall we talk about cooperation? That must be done by each state. But at the end of the day, we cannot compare the instrument, the state apparatus that we can find in Spain to the ones you can find in Latin America. There is extreme poverty. The official term, according to the INEC in Costa Rica, especially in the Caribbean region, is in the Limon province, where this population of African origins and indigenous peoples live in extreme poverty, and cooperation plays a fundamental role in there. So I am talking about the instrument for Neighborhood 2021-2027. That is one of the main principles or tools of the European strategy 2021-2030. It is based on 3 pillars: geographical cooperation with partner countries, thematic programs on human rights, peace and stability, and then the fast-track component for crisis. For crisis management, I am surprised to see some lack of readiness or preparation or knowledge of the political leaders. I have to say it, because when in Costa Rica people inquired about what happened with the Filomena snowstorm when airports were closed down, or with the floods last year in Valencia, well, that is what a crisis is like. Crisis appears suddenly, and if politicians are not ready to cope with them, these things happen. So the New York Convention is a paradigm shift in terms of international law in the field of human rights, not because new rights were created, but because it reinforces some of the previous rights, and they increase human dignity as a basis to appeal to the political leaders and the international community. From this perspective, international cooperation is not about the mere distribution of material resources. It's about distributing justice and achieving an equanimous respect for the human dignity. And from my humble point of view, I have to say that I find that the convention makes a mistake when it says that human dignity is a principle. Because what it does is that it can become just a weighing. When you weigh human dignity, beware of it. So beware of the signatory states of the convention, because by weighing the human dignity in the convention, human dignity is something that is inalienable from any right, and it can revert what justice is. So when economy is articulated around the ethical and political principles, can this become a real equity tool for a more inclusive and fairer society? The European Union undoubtedly has been a great actor in the consolidation of relations with Costa Rica in economic and social matters through the delegation since 1984. Costa Rica, as a state, has led the ranking in Central America and the whole of America, of Latin America. The delegation of the European Union was the first one to be in Central America and represents the European Union and coordinates actions with the embassies of the member states. What was the purpose of it? Because the delegation shows that cooperation was a vehicle for protection and inclusion of the rights of the most vulnerable groups, articulated around several tools: the dialogue agreement and the partnership agreement between the European Union and Latin America, as you can read in my research paper that I have to submit at the end of this seminar. But I want to give you some facts about the importance of the delegation and cooperation between 2013 and 2024. There's been an increase, thanks to this agreement, of 203%, up to 7.203 billion euros. Costa Rica has become the biggest economic partner of the European Union in Central America. But if you are familiar with the work of cooperation, you might say, Sergio, that's very nice, but Costa Rica hasn't been direct potential in terms of cooperation for many years. Why? Because in 2021, Costa Rica became the fourth country in Latin America and the fourth country in Central America and the first country in Latin America to be part of the OECD. Because even if it's a middle-income country, that has nothing to do with the cooperation. That's why Costa Rica, after that, and together with the AC programs, have been working on triangular cooperations. We can say that Costa Rica has not benefited from direct aid since 2021 because it's a middle-income country. It hasn't benefited from other types of aid coming from the European Union and Spain. So that is one of the results of this strategy. But what about the actions about shared skills? Article 44 of that treaty that gives the necessary competencies to the European Union to start a cooperation in terms of development. Spain, as one of the member states, is an active subject of cooperation or an active player of cooperation in Costa Rica. It's one of the main partners. On the one hand, the European Parliament has created a broader and more comprehensive strategy of the European Union versus other institutions because it has to safeguard the principles and objectives of the European Union. That is about the Treaty of the European Union, but what about the Charter of Fundamental Rights? It is not quoting cooperation directly, but it is indirectly stating through the acquis communautaire, is forging through the interpretation made of the article safeguarding human dignity, right to life, equal treatment before the law, children equality, and the rights of people with disabilities, stresses the importance of cooperation. In 2017, the European Union set the European Consensus for Development, the principles of cooperation with the developing countries to achieve a contribution towards the 2030 agenda and to generate a sustainable development. If we get this European Consensus for Development and another pillar, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, 27th July 2015. That way we combine aid with other public policies, because the purpose is that every public policy is effective. If it's not effective, why is it even promoted? There's no point. So, after everything I have said, if we move to Costa Rica, if we move to looking at some villages or places in Latin America that are in endemic poverty, and where many of these groups are even more vulnerable, what needs to be done? What are the policies that need to be started out? Well, I think that if we are to reply to this question, most relevantly, we should follow the path we've been taken. And Spain, even if there are some actors and stakeholders that have criticized it, cooperation for development symbolizes everything. That's why I am focusing on Costa Rica. If Costa Rica is standing where it is right now, it is thanks to this cooperation for development. So even if it is not now a beneficiary of this cooperation for development, this is not a failure. It is precisely because those policies have been working since 1984. They have benefited Costa Rica efficiently, in an efficient way, in a practical way. So let's keep doing so. Ultimately, so far, human rights have been interpreted for and from the majorities in the political spaces. The nexus with the inclusive citizenship and the multicultural democracy imposes a new reading of those human rights under the light of a dual perspective, both diversity and minority. The contribution of the European of the European development or cooperation for development is fundamental if we are to promote the inclusion of the minority groups. This highlights the diversity of the minority groups, which in turn highlights the importance of a coordinated international effort for their protection along the lines of the creation and the spirit of the creation of the United Nations, a new world system after the conflicts. So has the situation changed? Yes, it has. I would lie if I said the opposite. The situation has changed, but the perspective or the approach can still be the same. There are some conflicts yet, maybe different, but people who live in vulnerability are still there. It is okay to focus on digitization. I am for it, but before any digital literacy, we need to make sure that every person has to be literate. It's like going to Mars to find some water in there, where instead of looking for water in Mars, let's look for water here. Let's not make people travel dozens or kilometers before finding any water. So we must focus in the populations where the highest poverty levels are. We need to cater for the basic needs of the people. The 2030 strategy is like a guiding framework for people with disability by integrating this cooperation for development with the New York Convention, with the aim of reducing the inequalities, this strategy has consolidated a set of inclusive public policies by reinforcing governance, the participation of the civil society in the protection of people with disabilities. There are still some challenges, such as, for instance, the need for more binding measures and for broader policies if we are to guarantee their effectiveness. By way of a conclusion, I would say that before I knew that I was going to stand in the same room where Christopher Columbus met the Catholic king and queen, and by chance, I don't know if you know that Christopher Columbus in his final trip went to Costa Rica and to the Limon province. So it's like a coincidence. But in this world of cooperation and interculturality, we need to be aware of this. So I am very grateful to the people of Costa Rica. They welcomed me with open arms. Last time I was there, I even met the president of the Constitutional Court. And we jurists always look at the constitutional law with the compared law. Portugal, Greece are the examples in disability, but Costa Rica has been sui generis, protecting those rights since 1949 with not much dignity, because they said that people with disabilities were disabled. And then they modified Article 51 of the Constitution and changed the wording from disabled to people with disability before Spain did so. So that's why I need to defend the methodology, to say that disability law is a new discipline, is a new type of law. And this is one of the pillars that I use as an endorsement. The protection of minority groups, the protection from the perspective of the compared constitutional law, has enabled Costa Rica to revert the situation. The law is like a limit, a boundary to power. So without any further ado, this is the end of my intervention. I still have 9 more minutes, but I would like you to use it for questions. You can also criticize me, but always within the boundaries of the constitutional law.
Bueno, ya has terminado.
Well, this is over. So you had the chance to explain your work. I have enjoyed your presentation, and I have a comment. You realize that you haven't gone through the slides of your PowerPoint deck? And you cannot say that jurists or law students fail to be able to use PowerPoint. I've been working with jurists for all my life, and well, I would have liked to see all the laws that you have mentioned, all the strategies, or the public policies, Article 4, Article 44. We have to see it. We have to be able to see it, because otherwise we get lost. That is why you should have been projecting the words, the laws, the names of the laws. And I think Teresa Freixas, who is the legal expert, will agree. Well, the second thing is Everything was very interesting, but I see some obstacles. I will tell you the ones I can see, and probably my colleagues will see some others. I like the legal perspective you've used, the approach of the norm, which is along the lines of the paradigm shift and the paradigm of the rights. You play with them and you create something that you have called disability law. I think one of the successes of your text is that you understand international cooperation not as an instrument or as instrumental. I think you understand it as a constitutional contribution, but I think the analysis is too descriptive. And I was missing some practical tools from the sociology field, from the political economy, from the cooperation field. I haven't seen that in the theoretical framework. I've only seen the legal framework. So you have to explore the international dimension of all those tools, the strategy, the conventions. It is true that the European strategy is an articulating tool of the actions of the European Union. The difference between soft law and hard law is quite complex, but some of the proposals, some of the European proposals are not binding. Anyway, I'd like to know how you can effectively translate this into non-European contexts. How to translate that strategy, that action, into different context outside of the boundaries of the European Union. So I would say, to what extent that the social model of disability, the way it is promoted by the European Union, can adapt to the socioeconomic realities of Costa Rica. Because if the model cannot be applied to the socioeconomic context of Costa Rica, it is not feasible. Is it really true? Can it really be adapted to the Costa Rica reality? Otherwise, we have to find a different one. And then secondly, there is a risk of making things similar to how we do them in Europe. The Europeanization, the European standardization. Can it, for instance, override the local proposals? Because if everything is done by Europe and by European cooperation, then by European actions, then the internal local policies become diluted. And then one more thing that should be detailed, further detailed, the specific indicators that would enable you to assess whether the changes are structural and not just normative. Specific indicators used by cooperation when the ACID was visible and working in Costa Rica. Did it have any indicators to see whether that cooperation has made structural changes and not just theoretical or normative changes? That is what interests me the most. And then, well, for you to be able to empirically measure the quality of the actions of the European Union in the people from Costa Rica, in the Costa Rican population, that would be very difficult. I don't know if the model will let you do that. I don't know if you can assess the empirical efficacy.
Efectivamente,
Anyways, I wish to congratulate you because I think you have the capacity to connect research proposals that can be very beneficial in their later development. Thank you very much.
Pues bien, empezando con la última.
Starting with your last question, I do believe that those indicators, I believe that the development cooperation has an indescribable potential as backed by more than 50,000 references, including articles and links or information from the OECD, European Union, the Ministry of Costa Rica. And I must agree with you that maybe providing that sociological dimension is very relevant for readers to identify this perfectly, not only from the perspective of sociology, but also from the economic aspect. We can show what it has been done since the EU delegation is there since 1964, and there are states that have very strong cooperation: Switzerland, Germany, and of course Spain. Costa Rica, since it benefited was included in the OECD, hasn't received direct cooperation because it's a middle-income country. But there's a trick there. Since 2024, I have seen more poverty in the streets of Costa Rica. I have seen how certain public policies have been worsening, but this has to do with the political behavior that we have currently. If the politicians and the council members or the local authorities that are going to address accessibility and don't know what accessibility is, there's no potential progress. That's what I saw and identified in my last stay. It is not an accessible country because there are no sidewalks. Someone who is blind or has reduced mobility, or maybe an elderly person or a young person who broke a leg playing soccer, as we were saying previously, can't walk because there are no sidewalks or pedestrian crossings. But lack of pedestrian crossings happens it's something that is everywhere in Latin America. So that's a small element. The constitutional room, when I was there in my last day, I was talking to the president magistrate. He was congratulating me for encouraging me to make their resolutions, their judgments accessible. And I want to congratulate the magistrate because they issue 30 or 40,000 rulings and everything works perfectly. In Spain, how many do we have? 6,000, and we keep complaining. But as I was saying, you are right. I want to thank you for pointing this out, and I will address this in my research to provide this sociological framework. And in terms of economic policy, I will have to make these mentions. The purpose of this work is to extrapolate what I have been seeing and take it to the assertion that European cooperation is indispensable to keep strengthening countries like Costa Rica that moved from being a non-developed country to a developed country. That's what makes it clear that it's a successful country, as Costa Rica has shown since it accessed the OECD. You said that I mentioned strategies that are not binding, it's soft law. and some were useless. It was a waste of public money. There's a strategy, and for example, jurists that know that it's soft law, we know that there's nothing there. It's insignificant. But it is important because we are European citizens. We also do European cooperation, not in an explicit but in an implicit way. So when we cross the Atlantic and travel there, we are doing European cooperation. We are sharing those values, those principles that since the European Union was created, we have been sharing that. In this case, we're talking about Latin America, but we could be talking about other places of the world. PowerPoint. There's no way I can fix this now. But I accept the criticism and take note. I can promise, and I promised, as Adolfo Suarez said, that I wasn't going to use a PowerPoint presentation. There's a crucifix behind me, so I can promise that I wasn't going to use a PowerPoint, but Miguel Angel said that I needed one. Because at the end of the day, I believe that by using words and being able to transmit the idea, I think PowerPoints can be a double-edged sword, because I would have risked reading and not paying attention to the audience, and that's a risk that I'm scared of.
Help them to follow the presentation.
Yeah. In your question. Es más, lo traduzco en español.
Knowing that we are talking about disability, if I brought a presentation, this is a further argument. No jokes, I'm serious. PowerPoints, if we had someone with visual impairment, I would have to be translating all the time what we are seeing on the PowerPoint. PowerPoint should be the same, and same thing in the case of people who are deaf, there should be subtitles. And I think I answered all questions by Professor Rosa. Yes, I think you responded broadly, but be careful with the role of snake charmers. Speakers can be wonderful, but in the audience, you have different levels of understanding. So it is very useful to have a guide if you're mentioning different chapters, 4, 7, and 22. I know that you are a master of rhetorics, okay, but people want to have access to the norm. So don't use that as an excuse, because it's not a good excuse. I wasn't going to take the floor because I want to make this afternoon brief, but I will speak on my behalf, but as part of the jurists that are here. Although I'm just mere learning compared to Teresa Freixas, Roderick, Rosa.
Pero voy a hacer un comentario un poco.
I want to make kind of like I'm going to make a comical comment and a serious one regarding the use or not use of a presentation, because we had wonderful power presentations. I defend the use of word and the value of word and oratory as an art, rhetorics, words, and I understand my dear Rosa Maria Martínez de Codes' criticism, but I want to warn you something. Capturing the attention of the listeners for 45 minutes is something that is beyond human. Not even Castelar could do it. So whoever hears you, I mean, you're really good with words, and I must accept that. You speak really well, but there must be some milestones in your presentation that help us guide the audience from minute 1 to minute 45. I was telling Ismael that I was loving how dynamic his presentation was, and I can say the same thing about other presentations, but something that serves as milestones. And then really briefly about the background. I would have liked to hear more about something you said that has to do with the philosophy of law, whether a law is fair with disability. Law is a tool. Is law being fair with disability? I think law as a legal science is being increasingly fair because it's evolving towards full inclusion. But legal maximum is summa jus, summa nia. Maximum law is maximum injustice. It is being better, but the implementation of law is not following that pace. We have the legal sciences, and then we have the implementation of legal sciences, and there's the implementation that is lagging behind. And there are many laws, but the inclusion or the
Ana?
Yeah, I had a conceptual and theoretical remark. It also ties to what Rosa was saying about the concept of, should I speak more slowly? Yeah, it's fine. To what Rosa was saying about the concept of Europeanization, European integration, but it also ties to how the European Union itself is using this discourse of, shared values, setting of norms, etc., which is not quite clear, I think, in your presentation, because you take the legal foundation of the Treaty of European Union, elaboration on rights, and connect this with the discourses that are being projected to the third countries. Because we have to always keep in mind when the European Union makes laws, it makes laws for 27 member states and uses those laws, those definitions of values, norm setting, agenda setting, also in the foreign policy. So I think that's also important. So when you speak about the European strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities, you're speaking about the ways, strategic ways in which the European Union operationalized agreements, okay, and the visions for the future, okay. But this becomes a soft diplomatic tool that is used directly or indirectly in third countries. So in terms of how the European Union strategically operates with these strategies in third countries, it's not quite clear. So what you're saying that, the European Union has these ideas, these values, that are not European as like universal values, but the ways that Europe operationalized this through the strategies is being transferred to Costa Rica. How? In the development, and through, like the foreign affairs development cooperation that works also through the European Parliament, etc., etc. So is it the part of, foreign aid that the European Union gives to certain projects and certain initiatives? Or is it, setting new norms in a foreign country? I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, but I think, whether we are a bit in a very traditional and a colonial way, imposing our values to the other people, okay? Or we are filtering the ways in which other people are working with this concept, by, having this, how to say, assuring that these values are being protected when we are giving the money for a certain kind of project. So if European Union finds a certain kind of development project in Costa Rica, it's going to make sure that there is the respect for the right for the people with disabilities, or we are changing the norms and setting the agenda in other countries. Was that clear?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
It is true. Because it would be going against the principle of the European Constitution. Not the Constitution that it doesn't have, the Constitution meaning the creation. One of the ideals is not to impose what I say, and what I say is the only truth. But it is true that thanks to this strategy, although it's a soft law norm, as we all know, it is an instrument that is passed and promoted to implement the convention. And if the convention in the Article 32 addresses explicitly as one of the fundamental pillars of the convention, although it is at the end of the convention, normally when the person who designs a law, or at least in my opinion, as a researcher, you may detect that the most relevant aspects can be included at the beginning and not at the end. And as Strummel, an ILO specialist, was saying, it's one of the notions that created more friction. There was no clear agreement. It was finally included, but the strategy states it like that, and it's complemented with the neighboring complement that I mentioned. It's one of the three pillars of the union is geographical cooperation with partnering countries, among which Costa Rica. We also have Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, Pacific, and other places. And then, in terms of competences, I was mentioning Article 4 of the European Union Treaty, and that are the shared competences that are not part of the member state of the European Union. And it is about having all hands on deck to make cooperation effective. One of the main axes in cooperation is, or focus, one of the main focuses is to eradicate poverty. Imagine if you're in a situation of poverty, you have additionally a disability, and you're part of one of the 8 indigenous peoples that I was mentioning, or an African descendant community. The situation of vulnerability increases dramatically. So we have a solid framework. There's no imposition. It's the other way around, based on the possibilities that states have. And I was saying that there are states that are more powerful in terms of cooperation, like Germany and Switzerland, and, well, Spain to the measure of its capacities. So we were able to make this a success, and this is something that I will detail further in my publication. Thank you very much. I think Professor Teresa Freixas has the floor. It is very interesting what you're saying in your work. I do use PowerPoint.
No es simplemente un PowerPoint. ¿Y por qué
We can refer to this as PowerPoint, but right now it is very sophisticated.
ficha del PowerPoint? Pero sí que
We shouldn't read the PowerPoint text, but people who are listening, our audience, can follow that script. And that is important when it comes to quoting norms, dates. It is visually good to have that support.
puede ser muy útil también para después incorporarlo al producto.
And it can be really useful to include that in the outcome that is published, because it's not so much about charts, figures. We need other instruments, and it is very useful in whatever is published, whether it's electronic or on paper, to have those milestones. And regarding disability, we don't have these instruments, but soon we will have them. When we had the conference on the future of Europe, we used the multimedia platform created by the European Union. It was going to be
Y entonces esa plataforma...
It was going to be a face-to-face meeting, but it ended up being a virtual one. So this platform was created that translated everything to the official languages, and it generated an audio and a braille text. We don't have to do it necessarily. We will need technicians who do it or who help us do it. This technique will help us better capture the attention and distribute the contents in listeners, and let us not speak about what will happen when AI is more advanced, because maybe by then we will all have to retire. But I push you to and encourage you to explore this world a little bit. I was very reluctant when I was younger, but I have seen that it's useful. So if it's useful, let us use it. Regarding the content, I would like you to structure quantitatively and qualitatively the indicators. What are the measures or policies that, or where the law of the European Union can be useful for a country like Costa Rica, because it's not the same thing to think about Costa Rica than to think of Peru. It doesn't have anything to do. So if you are going to work on Costa Rica, you should mention specifically why an indicator is useful and for what reason. That's all I wanted to comment. Move forward in this work. It is interesting, and it is connected to the focus of the values of the European Union to launch this series of initiatives, particularly with these policies. The values of the Union must be part of the European Union's foreign policy. We didn't used to have a foreign policy, not that we have that much right now, but we have something. So those values, solidarity, equality, cooperation, all those values are very important. Thank you very much, and I take note of the PowerPoint. Yeah, okay, it'll become sacred. I think this PowerPoint thing will chase you forever. Because I'm also a jurist and I'm a professor, and I must confirm and inform you that in many thesis defenses, PowerPoints are required. I have attended thesis defenses where there were screens and for the PowerPoint presentations. They said, congratulations for your approach. It's an analysis on the potential influence of the European Union on a specific group outside the European Union. Now we're talking about disability, but
la introducción de unos bienes o servicios o lo que sea.
So as I was saying, now we're talking about disability, but we could also apply this to goods and services. So this is about the European Union's capacity to arrive to a territory with its own values. The question is, why would the European Union be interested in working on cooperation in disability in Costa Rica? Let's go beyond disability. You addressed a geopolitics topic. When I ask my students Why do we help poor countries in development? Is it altruism because we're brothers and sisters, or because there's an interest? So what would be the European Union's interest to start doing cooperation, development cooperation, or whatever type of cooperation in Costa Rica? What would be the underlying interest? Is there an interest from the whole of the European Union, or from some specific countries? Do some specific countries have any interest in that area? You just mentioned Africa. So behind European cooperation, you have France, that is losing its power in Africa. When it comes to Asia, European cooperation in Asia is not that powerful because there are other countries that have a colonial past that is very close to those countries. I'm not discussing or challenging the interest of European cooperation in Costa Rica, but we need to understand that we go there with our European values, but we have to understand what is underlying geopolitically that cooperation. Today we may be talking about disabilities, but for cooperation tomorrow it may be something economic, security, or whatever.
Thank you, Professor. If I may, I will reply to you now. It is true that after being a beneficiary of a cooperation project that was very humble, and yes, I was the principal investigator, but it was only 1,900 euros, but I've done millions of things, let alone if we had had projects of several millions of euros. That is how you see the effectiveness of being a good manager or a bad manager when it comes to managing public funds. And most of the people in the public sphere are bad managers. This is what I think. It came from the bottom of my heart. So with that project, again, 1,900 euros, we've done over 50 training courses. All of them were free of charge. We only paid for the travel costs. In the monography, you can find details about it. And aside from the training courses, we organized meetings with mayors and other politicians of the Legislative Assembly to impose the methodology of the legal clinic, which is a replica of the one that I coordinated in Spain, again with 1,900 euros. And so if you ask me how we did it, it's because we had a very good team of people they are more seasoned than myself because I graduated 4 years ago, but I was surrounded by legislative advisors, mayors, university professors, and some more legal experts. It was a solid team, and I invite you to read the monography that explains it in 10 chapters. You can see the indicators we were talking about, and I have to praise the value, the worth of the international cooperation, the effective protection, etc. And this is where we are standing right now. How it is organized, how it is handled, how it is managed. We find ourselves surrounded by laws and regulations that sometimes are very bad and harmful to the society. They have been promoted based on a purely ideological perspective. When you make laws that way, the risk is the kind of situation we live in right now. Now we don't have our the general budget, which is very harmful, seriously harmful. The general budgets are not there. Article 49 of the Constitution was modified over a year ago, and yet fundamental laws are still pending. For instance, the one on disability and dependence. But I have to praise again the role of the third sector, as stated by Article 49, or the explicitly stated protection women and people with disability need. But it's all around always the same topic: public policies and public managers. Any more questions, dear colleagues? Yes. I'd like to invite you to reflect around some aspects mentioned by the professors, the real intention behind international cooperation for development, together with all the criticism. You have to understand the country I come from. Cooperation was present in many territories for a long time. And I'm also saying this because I am a social controller, and I have to ask, what happened to those funds? What are the facilities that were effectively left in the territory so they can manage themselves? In many cases, in many poor countries, the funds coming from international cooperation are used instead of funds that should have been supplied by the state. So since you have that case study, please choose one specific example, one specific case that enables you to identify the theory of change that cooperation agency used, and how that cooperation agency is promoting certain capacities about the guarantees of people with disabilities and the affirmative action. Once that action is stated, is established, what it does, because in the territories, those kinds of aids create a strong dependency instead of abilities. Colombia heavily relies on American cooperation, US cooperation, and when they left, the harm was very, very, very high, very heavy, and it has had a huge impact. So with due respect, please take it into account. Well, what you can see, you can feel. If the cooperation is politicized, it can be very harmful. Thankfully, the projects I've been participating in have never been politicized. That is why they were so minor, so humble. Yeah, when a state receives aid and cooperation, the other state probably wants something in exchange. It is a shame because they're playing with human rights, and especially in this case, the rights of the people with disabilities and vulnerable people. I don't know, because everything is up to the political will, which is, of course, worsening because this system is revolving around itself, and people who are there like to be there. 2 interventions, and you can reply to both at the same time. Sergio, thank you. I admired you because of your use of the language. So I'd like to know whether you have a situated knowledge. As Raquel said yesterday, situated knowledge. Have you identified one? If there is one, if you have identified one, did it affect your research? Yeah, and the second one, very quickly. So you were saying that Christopher Columbus and coincidence, I just got an email. There is a call for proposals for the ecosystem of transfer, knowledge transfer. And you can apply for 1 million euros or 150,000 euros. So this call for proposals is open if you want to apply for them. This is coming from QUD, University Cooperation for Development. So you have to know that this call for projects sometimes do not receive any reply or any proposal. Many students don't even know they can have access to these. Those projects sometimes are never seen by students. They don't even apply for them. And well, 1,900 euros is more or less the cost of a flight to and from Costa Rica. So yeah, you need to really be passionate about what you want to do. Otherwise, you don't even bother to apply for these funds because it's too little money. I went to some more countries in Central America. I went to Costa Rica and some other countries, and Costa Rica is seen as an example. It's seen as a model, as the role model for other countries in the region. And they even say that Costa Rica has copied the human rights model of the European Union. I have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Yeah. Costa Rica, the name means, well, it's a rich coast, if we translate it into English, and it's because they thought that it was going to be very rich, that it was a very rich country. So there's an element of truth behind it. And thank you for this call for projects. I would maybe apply for them. The problem lies in the list of requirements. Probably not for PhD candidates. Probably you will have to choose a full professor that has to agree to submit a project for that call, because you can never imagine how many sleepless nights I've had in trying to justify all the expenses of my 1,900 euro project, let alone a 1 million project. I could never imagine how much justification you need for all the expenses. Well, if I may, the justification or the value of this project is the human values you get from it. And that is it. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Sergio.
Thank you, Sergio. Undoubtedly, beyond the anecdote of the PowerPoint, well, this is just a joke, and we'll make this joke, I'm sure, more times. But yeah, that is one of the perks of being part of this seminar, how to deliver a public speech. You have shown good skills, good speaking skills, but well, there is always some room for improvement. And now we can watch this video, and then you have some shopping time.
Mi compañera Nuria lo compartirá en el grupo de WhatsApp para que si queréis utilizarlo en redes sociales, pues ya sabéis cuál.
I will share it in the WhatsApp group if you want to share it in your social media, but please use the hashtags. Tomorrow is our last day. We can start at 9:30, but if you're joining me in the bus to the airport, please bring your suitcases because we will leave as soon as the conference is over. And please wear your coat in the tour because it will be dark very soon. The tour starts at 6.